So we're continuing today with the series we've been doing in July based on the Declaration of Independence, which is in honor of Independence Day. And because the Declaration of Independence is very much a product of the Enlightenment era, we're also working with some of the ideas from a new book called Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress by Steven Pinker. This book is a re-examination of the philosophy and the values of the Enlightenment era, and it's really an invitation to us today to rediscover and reevaluate and embrace those values. It's really an invitation to us to own the Enlightenment because really it is a product of our Western culture and has resulted in so many wonderful things over the past 200 years. In the first few pages of the book, the author gives us the main idea behind his motive for writing the book. He says, more than ever, the ideals of reason, science, humanism, and progress need a wholehearted defense. We take its gifts for granted, like newborns who will live more than 8 decades, markets overflowing with food, clean water that appears with the flick of a finger, the world's knowledge and culture available in a shirt pocket. Anyone want to know the score of the World Cup? It's right there. These are human accomplishments, not cosmic birthrights. War, scarcity, disease, ignorance, and lethal menace are a natural part of existence. And we know that countries can slide back into these primitive conditions. And so, we ignore the achievements of the Enlightenment at our peril. Now, we've been through the statistics. We've done all the number crunching in detail. War, poverty, disease, ignorance, and even death from accidents and natural disasters are way down. They've gone way down in the past 200 years. Human beings around the world, not just here, but around the world, are living longer, healthier, wealthier, and happier lives. And the idea here is not to cultivate complacency. The numbers do look good, and there is much room for improvement. You see, the problem for me personally is that doom and gloom, pessimism stuff does not motivate me. And you paint a picture of dire peril, doom and gloom, and my attitude is, what's the point? Give me some sign that there is something we can do that stands a reasonable chance to work, and I'll get on it. I will get on it. Show me that human beings can solve their problems, including the ones that we inadvertently create. That's what makes me want to take action, and that's what this book demonstrates, is that we can make a difference. We have been making a huge difference. So here's the paragraph from the Declaration of Independence that we've been working with. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So on July 1st, we talked about self-evident truth. Last week, we talked about life and liberty, so today the topic is the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence is really a declaration of fundamental human rights. And the pursuit of happiness as a human right was a revolutionary idea that Thomas Jefferson borrowed from the English philosopher John Locke. The search for happiness, that's been going on since the dawn of human history, right? Spiritual teachers and philosophers have been talking about the search for happiness all those years, but it took Locke and Jefferson to make it part of a system of government. And that's something that we lose track of. That's something perhaps that we take for granted, because it is truly remarkable to have something like this enshrined in a founding document of a country and a government. So here's what John Locke wrote on the subject. He said, "The necessity of pursuing happiness is the foundation of liberty. Therefore, the highest perfection of intellectual nature lies in a careful and constant pursuit of true and solid happiness. Okay, true and solid happiness. As opposed to what? False and squishy happiness? It really brings us face to face with the first problem we have to address when we talk about the pursuit of happiness, which is, how do you define happiness? Is it hopelessly subjective, or can we come up with some kind of an objective standard of happiness that everybody will kind of get on board with and agree with? And it just so happens that we spent 7 weeks, you may remember, last fall, working on that very problem. We were working with a book called Happiness, a guide to developing life's most important skill. It was by a Tibetan Buddhist monk called Matthew Ricard. And he starts out in the book by identifying this very problem that we run into when we talk about happiness. He says, has the word happiness itself been so overused that people have given up on it, turned off by the illusions and platitudes it evokes? For some people, talking about the search for happiness seems almost in bad taste. Protected by their armor of intellectual complacency, they sneer at it as they would at a sentimental novel. I think he gets the problem. For many people, happiness has always been something that's beyond their immediate grasp, or they have some wild definition of it, which means they have to be constantly in a state of bliss, all these impossible goals. But for a lot of people, it's always about something that's lacking. Do you know what I mean? They say, I would be happy if I had this. I would be happy if I looked like that. I would be happy if I lived in a certain place, and so on and so forth. Actually, our old friends, Calvin and Hobbes, can shed some light on exactly how that conversation goes. All right, so here we go. First frame, Calvin is talking to his tiger buddy Hobbes, and he says, if you could wish for anything, what would it be? And Hobbes has a ready answer. He says, a big sunny field to be in. Well, Calvin is a bit outraged. You might get an idea of what his definition of happiness is from his reaction here. He says, a stupid field, you've got that now. Think big, riches, power, pretend you could have anything. And in the next frame, there is Hobbes lying on his back, sleeping with a big smile on his face, and Calvin says, actually, it's hard to argue with someone who looks so happy. And as I looked at that frame, I thought to myself, I know that look on Hobbes' face very well. Is there anything happier than a golden retriever? Is there anything happier than our golden retriever, Tara? That's who that is. I mean, she is happy and perfectly content. She likes nothing more than to be out in the field with us, with her favorite ball, and of course in that position she's pretty sure she's going to get a tummy rub on top of it, so she's absolutely thrilled. And coincidentally, today happens to be her 9th birthday, and I just took this last month. She's 9 years old and she's still a puppy, so anyway, happy birthday, Tara. So, Matthew Ricard goes on to give us what I think is a definition of happiness that I think is one of the best that I've found. I think it's one that people can agree on, one that's pretty hard to sneer at. Okay, here it is. He says, by happiness I mean here a deep sense of flourishing that arises from an exceptionally healthy mind. This is not a mere pleasurable feeling, a fleeting emotion, or a mood, but an optimal state of being. Happiness is also a way of interpreting the world, since, while it may be difficult to change the world, it's always possible to change the way we look at it. That's pure unity. So what are some of the things that can help to make for and to reinforce that deep sense of human flourishing? Well, this morning I want to start by offering a checklist that's based on the work of philosopher Martha Nussbaum. Now, I had never come across this this list before until I read it in Steven Pinker's book. And when I read it, it caused me to stop and to reflect on how these things are showing up in my life and maybe consider some of the areas that could use improvement. Now she calls these things, she calls them fundamental capabilities, because I guess that's the way philosophers have to talk. I would call them something like the foundation elements of flourishing and happiness, but fundamental capabilities it is. So here's the list. Let's start out with the first 6. Longevity, followed by health and safety. Hey, you have to have that life in the first place, and you have to be healthy and you have to be safe. You got to get your survival needs out of the way. Those things are essential though. So longevity, health, and safety, followed by literacy, knowledge, free expression, political participation, having a say in what is happening in your government, and then the next set here. Aesthetic experience, in other words, enjoying the arts, going to a musical comedy or the symphony or whatever it is that you like, watching TV, enjoying the arts. Recreation and play, enjoyment of nature, emotional attachments, social affiliations, and finally, opportunities to reflect on and engage in one's own conception of the good life. Like I said, it caused me to stop and kind of reassess my life, and I do mean this to be used as a checklist. I think it's a pretty complete list. It's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's an excellent checklist, which is why we've given you this list. It's in the handout in your bulletin. I encourage you to take it home. Spend some time with it. And especially because, like it says there in number 12, spend some time with it and use it as an opportunity to reflect on and engage in your own conception of the good life based on those elements. Now notice what is conspicuously absent from this list. Money, stuff, possessions, power, status, all of the stuff that Calvin values so much. Now granted, wealth, it is a factor in happiness, in the sense that you can exchange wealth for the time or the opportunities to seek knowledge, recreation, arts, and so on, but not as an end in and of itself. That's the important distinction. Okay, so how are we doing in America when it comes to happiness? They've been measuring happiness for many, many years now, and the current gold standard in measurement is found in a document that's called simply the World Happiness Report. It uses information gathered by the Gallup organization, and then it presents it in an annual report. So, what country do you think was ranked number 1 as the happiest country in 2018? Any guesses?
Iceland. Iceland.
I've heard some in the top 3. It's Finland. Close by. Finland is the number 1 happiest country. It's Finland. There it is, right in there with Norway and Sweden and so on and so forth. I know that we have a lot of folks in this congregation who are part of the Norwegian Society. Is that the proper name of it?
Scandinavian.
The Scandinavian. All right, yeah. So it covers a lot of different countries, right? So y'all are doing pretty good on this survey. But let's take a look at the top 10 here. Let's take a look at the top 10 in the next frame here. Yeah, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Canada, New Zealand, Sweden, and Australia, rounding out the top 10. Unfortunately, the USA comes in at number 18, just behind Luxembourg and just before the UK. And that was actually a drop from number 14, which was back in 2017. In fact, since 2013, we've averaged about number 13 on the list. And it seems to me that we have everything we need in terms of that list of foundation elements to be consistently in the top 5, I would think. Not that this is a contest or anything, but it's useful information. It's like kind of a mirror being held up, and it's not cause for alarm, because I don't see any country that finished higher than we did that I would question seriously, although I was a little surprised to note that Israel is in 11th place, and I say that only because they live in the shadow of a truly existential threat to their existence. Existential threat, that's what it is, from neighboring countries, and yet they check out as being number 11 on the happiness scale. So that's very interesting. Well, what is it that the people in Finland, Norway, and Denmark might have discovered that we may have missed? I don't know, pickled herring, lutefisk. They certainly have better pastry than we do, but you know, who knows? The one thing I did find very interesting, this is another correlation here. Finland, Denmark, and Norway are on another top 10 list. They're on the top 10 list of the least religious countries in the world. Just something to reflect on. No easy answers here in terms of causation. But it does seem a little bit ironic that we enshrine the pursuit of happiness in our founding document, and yet our reach kind of exceeds our grasp. So in Enlightenment Now, the author makes this observation. He says, still, when it comes to happiness, many people are underachievers. Americans are laggards among their first world peers, and their happiness has stagnated in the era sometimes called the American century. And none of us are as happy as we ought to be, given how amazing our world has become. Personally, I think that I am at least as happy as anyone from Finland or Denmark, and I know that most of you probably feel the same way, but unfortunately the polling people didn't ask us, or the results might have been vastly different, right? Yeah. The point is, there's room for improvement, and there's no simple explanation for why we don't score higher consistently. Perhaps it's because not enough people have read this book, Enlightenment Now, or another book that's out there called Factfulness, about how we're wrong about the state of the world when we look out there and have this pessimistic attitude that we see. And it brings us back around full circle to where we started in May by showing that people in America and other developed nations tend to be more pessimistic about human progress. It's not unique to us. Here's what Steven Pinker says. Whether or not the world really is getting worse, the nature of news will interact with the nature of cognition to make us think that it is. The nature of cognition, the way we think, which is our focus and unity. We can't control the content of the news, but we can control how we go about gathering information. We can control the way we discern. And we can learn how to master our cognitive biases, our biased ways of thinking. It involves a process of enhanced self-awareness, which is what we teach here, a process that spiritual teachers since the days of the Buddha have been recommending. Jesus picked up on the problem when he said this. He said, "Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye?" That is a perfect example of cognitive bias. One among many. Our tendency to see faults and problems out there instead of looking at our own thought process first. And we've learned a lot more about it since those days. We have so much more information about cognitive bias and the ways to go about at least reducing, if not eliminating them from our thinking. The pursuit of happiness has to start as an inside job. It's an inside job. We can get too busy finding fault in the people around us, in the world around us, and then forget to take time to reflect on those 12 fundamental capabilities and see, how are they showing up in our lives? Which ones am I ignoring? This is one of those consciousness conditioning tools like prayer, meditation, affirmations, denials. We focus on and we affirm the fact that humanity consistently and persistently solves the problems which confront us. Here's how it works. As with all new challenges, we are groping toward the right mixture of old-fashioned and novel stratagems, including human contact, art, meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, small pleasures, judicious use of pharmaceuticals, reinvigorated service and social organizations, and advice from wise people on how to lead a balanced life. Now, other than the pharmaceuticals, you can get all that right here. See you next week.